Welcome to the InfoSec Insider podcast, brought to you by URM, the UK's leading information and cybersecurity specialists.
Hi, my name's Annie and I'm here today with Mark O'Kane, who's one of our consultants here at URM. Welcome to another episode of InfoSec Insider. So today, Mark and I are going to be talking about the business continuity related controls in Annex A of ISO 27001. So first off, Mark, what are the requirements of the business continuity controls and how do they help organisations secure their assets during a disruption?
The business continuity controls are very much focused on how organizations will protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of their information assets during a business disruption. So in other words, a business disruption would be any business occurrence that can seriously impact an organization's core operational functions and their ability to operate as a business. So examples of this might be an incident where you lose your senior management team, or where a cyber attack occurs, or where your physical premises becomes unavailable. These would be examples of what such a disruption would look like. The A5 control set contains two business continuity controls. A.5.29, which is the first, requires organizations to plan in advance how they're going to maintain information security at an appropriate level during a disruption. A.5.30 hones in on that and requires companies to determine how they will prepare for IT-related business disruptions. So this would be things like a ransomware attack or a critical system going down or a data center going down, for example. Organizations have to determine the measures that they need to put in place to respond to these disruptions. They have to put them into practice, maintain those measures on an ongoing basis to make sure they continue to be effective, and regularly test these measures as well to ensure suitability. These controls also add an extra layer, in my opinion, to the way that companies handle incidents in general. This is important because many incidents are easily resolvable or have a manageable level of impact. However, there are some incidents that simply are so critical that they simply can't afford to be treated as one risk among many. So to prepare for this possibility, organizations have to determine what types of incidents could cause an unplanned disruption, how they will continue and recover from those disruptions as well, while securing their data at the same time. Another reason these controls are important is they require companies to prepare for disruptions in advance rather than having to decide in the heat of the moment. So by preparing for disruptions in advance, organizations are able to reduce the long-term impact that such disruptions can have on their assets. And a final point that I would mention is that the controls themselves require organizations to continually ensure that its business continuity and disaster recovery measures are effective, rather than just writing a policy or writing a procedure and then leaving it for a year and not looking at it for 12 months. So this is commonly done by establishing a business continuity plan and a disaster recovery plan, reviewing and testing those plans and communicating them to personnel who will be involved as well.
So you mentioned A5.29, which talks about maintaining information security at an appropriate level during disruption. Could you describe what's meant by this and some of the ways that organisations can put this into practice?
Sure. So one of the initial steps in this process is to define a business continuity plan, as I mentioned before. So this is a document which outlines what needs to be done when a particular disruption occurs so that you can continue to operate as a business whilst you're working to recover from that disruption at the same time. So one example of this would be what steps would we need to take if we suffered a cyber attack, for example? Who would we need to notify? How do we contain this so that it doesn't get worse? What steps need to be taken to keep the boat afloat, so to speak, whilst also helping us to restore normal operations as well? Another part of this process is defining the timescales and recovery points that need to be followed for a response to be successful. So if we take the same example of what if we had a ransomware attack, your business continuity plan should specify how soon you hope to have recovered from that. Do you aim to have resumed operations within a day, 2 days, for example? If any data is going to be lost as a result of that, how much of that can you afford to lose? So this is often mitigated by performing backups and having redundancy for your data and your equipment. And a final aspect that I would mention is that the controls require companies to consider how their normal ISMS activities will be affected by a disruption, whether they can continue as normal or whether alternative procedures would need to be in place to ensure some level of security. For example, one example that I would often refer to is when you're onboarding a new employee. So say, for example, your normal procedure is to onboard a new employee at your premises. If you lose your premises because it catches fire or because there's damage to the building, then you should have a backup process that specifies how are we going to onboard this person without our premises, such as doing it remotely. Whatever your requirements would be, it's important that these are incorporated into your BCP and communicated to your staff as well, so that everyone knows what needs to happen if one of those disruptions occurs.
You also spoke about how A5.30 requires organisations to have ICT readiness in order to prepare for an IT-related disruption. Could you just explain what's required in order to do that?
Sure. This control requires organizations to prepare in advance and ensure that their ICT resources that they need to continue operating in a disruption and recover from that disruption are available and well tested on a regular basis. So one common practice when doing this would be to conduct a business impact assessment at the beginning. This would include determining the impact of losing each of your IT assets, such as your computers, your applications, your data center, for example. This would allow you to prioritize your IT resources based on criticality and define measures in your business continuity plan to keep those resources available or recoverable. So as I mentioned before, this includes things like taking data backups, having redundancy for your IT equipment, such as your server or your computers. And the final requirement of this control is that your ICT readiness needs to be tested on a regular basis. This is often done by conducting tabletop exercises or technical drills, such as restoring a backup that's been taken or switching to a backup server, for example. The overall aim in conducting these tests is to ensure that any IT resources lost during a disruption can be recovered properly based on the recovery time and recovery point objectives in your BCP. Many organizations will conduct these tests on an annual basis, but of course, every company is different. And so it's important that as a company, you define whether it's necessary to conduct more tests or if annual tests are suitable.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. And just to finish us off, would you mind just telling us what you think some of the most common mistakes are that organizations make when working with these controls?
Sure. So one of the first mistakes that I would mention when it comes to these controls is when organizations don't review their business continuity plan regularly. As I mentioned before, there can often be a risk that when companies have established their ISMS policies and their business continuity procedures, of these documents not getting reviewed on a regular basis or as frequently as they should be. This is important because whilst your business continuity plan may be suitable now, it may not be suitable in a year's time because the requirements may have changed, or you may have decided you need to change your recovery time objective. So it's important to make sure that your business continuity documentation is reviewed regularly to make sure it continues to be suitable and tailored to the needs of the business. Another mistake that companies make is not testing their BCPs regularly. Because again, even if you're regularly reviewing your BCP, that doesn't necessarily mean that the measures in the BCP are going to be effective. And it also is a missed opportunity as well, because by conducting tabletop exercises or drill exercises where you practice out how you're going to respond to a disruption, these exercises give you an opportunity to see how you can do things better, make the processes more efficient, and improve your business continuity response in general. The third mistake I would mention is when the business continuity plan doesn't clearly specify the steps that need to be taken. So what I mean by this is I've seen business continuity plans in the past that contained a lot of wording and a lot of commitments, but don't clearly outline, step by step, perhaps in bullet points, what companies should do to recover. This is very important because when a disruption occurs, such as, again, like a cyber attack or loss of senior management, that's when people are going to be most anxious and when people are going to be worried about what happens next. So it's very important that when people are responding to a disruption, that the steps that they need to take to contain the matter and resume business as normal, that those steps are defined in simple terms and readable terms and are easily accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the main point of a business continuity plan at the end of the day, isn't it? It's to provide that direction during disruption. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mark. And for any of our listeners that want to learn a bit more about this topic, do go check out our blog on urmconsulting.com called ISO 27001-2022 A5 Organizational Controls Business Continuity. Thank you very much for listening today. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could spare a moment to leave a rating or review at ratethispodcast.com/InfoSec Insider. To listen to more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Podbean.
Thank you for listening to URM's InfoSec Insider podcast. For more information, visit our website at urmconsulting.com.